He took a job no one wanted, just to disappear into the silence of a forgotten forest. But his dog refused to rest, staring into the dark like something out there was watching them back. What they uncovered beneath that quiet land wasn't just buried. It was erased on purpose. Names of soldiers who never came home, hidden where no one was meant to look. And the moment they found the truth, someone came to make sure it stayed buried. Now, a veteran Navy SEAL must choose: walk away and survive, or stay and finish what they started. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories. The road narrowed long before Ethan Calder realized he had stopped checking the map. Gravel gave way to dirt. Dirt gave way to something less defined. 2 faint tire tracks cutting through tall grass and pale weeds that brushed against the sides of his truck like fingers trying to remember a shape. The forest ahead opened slowly, not in a dramatic reveal, but in a quiet surrender, as if it had been waiting long enough that it no longer needed to impress anyone. Ethan didn't slow down. He rarely did. At 43, he carried himself like a man who had spent most of his life reacting faster than others could think. 6'1", broad-shouldered, lean muscle built for endurance rather than display. His movements were economical, deliberate, nothing wasted, nothing soft. His face was angular, defined by a hard jawline and the faint shadow of a beard he never fully shaved. His eyes, blue-gray, held the kind of depth that came from seeing too much and choosing not to talk about it. His dark brown hair was cut short, military clean, though the early silver at his temples had begun to claim ground he didn't bother to defend. He wore the same thing he always wore: olive field jacket, red and dark blue plaid shirt underneath, dark cargo pants, worn brown leather boots, an old military watch that ticked with stubborn precision, a pocket knife, and a half-track backpack that held everything he allowed himself to keep. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Ronan sat still. The German Shepherd K9 was 5, maybe 6 years old. Past the reckless edge of youth, settled into something sharper. His black and tan coat was short and dense, his body built with clean muscle and balanced weight, not bulky, not intimidating at first glance. But there was nothing casual about the way he held himself. His posture stayed low, centered. His eyes, dark, focused, never drifted. They moved, tracked, measured. The world came to him not as scenery, but as signals. He didn't pant. He didn't shift. He watched. Ethan glanced at him briefly, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other loose near the gear shift. "You gonna tell me what's wrong?" he muttered, voice dry, almost bored. "Or just sit there and judge me?" Ronan didn't react. He never reacted unless there was a reason. That was one of the things Ethan trusted most about him, and one of the things that made him uneasy now. The trees thinned, and then the place. It wasn't dramatic. No broken gates, no warning signs, no cinematic collapse, just a clearing. A small wooden house stood slightly off-center, its paint long faded into a gray that blended too easily with the trees behind it. The porch sagged just enough to suggest time had passed, but not enough to say it had given up. Windows intact. Door closed. To the right, a barn, or what had once been one, leaned at an angle that made it look like it had tried to fall and changed its mind halfway through. Everything was still. Not abandoned. Not alive. Just waiting. Ethan killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed in, not heavy, not oppressive, but complete. The kind of silence that didn't come from emptiness, but from something choosing not to speak. He sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. No plan, no expectations. Just another place to stay. That's all this is, he said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. Ronan's ears twitched, just once. Ethan opened the door and stepped out. The air hit him clean, cool, sharp, carrying the faint scent of pine and something older beneath it. Not rot, not decay, just time. His boots pressed into the dirt with a soft crunch, solid ground. That mattered more than most people would understand. Ronan jumped down beside him without a sound. No leash. He didn't need one. They stood there together, looking at the house. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack and started forward. Let's see what we got. The house was better than expected. Inside, it smelled faintly of dust and dry wood. No mold, no recent damage. Furniture still in place. A table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed frame pushed against the far wall. Someone had left in a hurry once, but not recently. Ethan moved through the space methodically. Check windows, check corners, check exits. He didn't think about it. He just did it. Ronan followed, not close, not far, just enough distance to see everything Ethan couldn't. At one point, Ethan paused, hand resting against the edge of the table. Something about the room felt off. Not wrong. Just incomplete, like a sentence missing its last word. He exhaled slowly, forcing the thought away. Old place, he muttered. That's all. Ronan didn't respond, but he had stopped moving. Ethan noticed that. Turned. The dog stood near the doorway, not looking at Ethan, looking past him, through the open door, toward the barn. Still, focused. Ethan followed his gaze. The barn sat exactly where it had been when they arrived, leaning, quiet, half swallowed by weeds and shadow. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Yeah, Ethan said under his breath. I see it too. He didn't. Not really. But he knew that look. Ronan wasn't curious. He was locked. Ethan spent the next hour settling in. He cleared a section of the floor, set down his pack, checked the small iron stove in the corner. Functional. Barely. Enough. Routine. Routine kept the noise away, the thoughts, the memories, the things that came when he stopped moving. Outside, the light shifted slowly through the trees, not dimming yet, but softening, stretching shadows across the ground like long, quiet warnings. Ronan hadn't eaten. Ethan noticed that when he opened a small ration pack and set it down. Go on. Nothing. The dog didn't even look. Instead, he had moved back to the doorway, sat, and stared at the barn. It happened without sound. No wind, no movement, just... Ronan stood up, not slowly, not cautiously, sharp, immediate. His entire body shifted, weight forward, ears locked, muscles coiled beneath his skin like something had just snapped into place. Ethan froze. Because he had seen that before. Not here, not in a quiet forest, but in places where silence meant seconds, not safety. What is it? Ethan asked. Ronan took one step forward, then stopped, not advancing, not retreating, just holding, like he had reached a line no one else could see. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. The barn hadn't changed. The trees hadn't moved. The light was still soft, still calm. And yet, something had. Ethan stepped outside again, slower this time. Ronan didn't move ahead. He stayed just slightly in front, angled, not blocking, not leading, but ready. The ground between the house and the barn was uneven, patches of dry grass breaking through compact dirt. No fresh tracks, no signs of recent activity. Nothing. They stopped halfway. Ronan lowered his head slightly, sniffing, not the air but the ground itself. Then he turned, not toward the barn, toward a patch of earth off to the side. He moved there without hesitation and began to paw at the dirt, not digging wildly, measured, controlled. Ethan watched him, something deep in his chest beginning to tighten. Not fear, not yet, but recognition. This wasn't random. "Hey," he called quietly. "Easy." Ronan didn't stop. His paws struck the ground with steady rhythm, pausing only to sniff, then digging again, faster now. Ethan stepped closer. "What do you—" The sound cut him off. A dull, hollow thunk beneath the dirt. Not rock, not root. Something else. Ronan froze, looked up at Ethan, and for a moment, just a moment, there was something in the dog's eyes that didn't belong to instinct. It looked certain. Ethan crouched slowly, brushing away dirt with his hands. The surface beneath revealed itself inch by inch. Metal, old, flat. His fingers found the edge, cold. He exhaled slowly. "Well," he muttered. Ronan didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look away. Ethan cleared more dirt, revealing what looked like a small metal lid, partially buried, edges rusted but intact. Not natural, not accidental, placed. He sat back slightly on his heels, staring at it. The forest around them stayed quiet. Too quiet. Ronan shifted closer, pressing lightly against Ethan's side. Not pushing, not pulling. Grounding. Always grounding. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I see it now." He looked back toward the house. Then the barn. Then down at the metal beneath his hands. Whatever this place was, it wasn't empty. And whatever had been buried here hadn't been meant to stay found. Morning came slowly, like the forest had to remember how to wake. Light filtered through the tall northern pines in long, pale strands, touching the ground without warmth at first. The air held that quiet chill that lingered even after sunrise, clean, sharp, and just cold enough to remind a man he was alone. Ethan Calder was already awake. He hadn't slept much, not because of fear, because of memory. He stood just outside the cabin, one hand resting against the wooden frame of the doorway, eyes fixed on the patch of earth near the barn where the metal box now sat open. The contents hadn't moved since last night. They hadn't needed to. The name alone had done enough. Noah Vance. Ethan exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him like something heavier than air. "Doesn't make sense," he murmured. Behind him, Ronan remained inside the cabin. Still. Watching. The dog hadn't touched his food. Not the night before, not now. Ethan glanced back. "You planning on starving yourself over this?" No response. Ronan's posture hadn't changed. His head was slightly lowered, ears forward. Not tense, not aggressive. Focused. Listening to something that wasn't making a sound. Ethan turned away. He had learned a long time ago. When a K9 refused food, it wasn't stubbornness. It was priority. And right now, whatever lay beneath that ground mattered more. He knelt beside the open metal box again. The dog tag rested in his palm. Cold. Heavier than it should have been. The engraved letters were worn, but not erased. Noah Vance. Same unit, Same rotation, same desert heat that never left your lungs. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He was pulled out, he muttered. That's what they said. Missing in action. No body recovered. No closure. Just a line on a report. Ethan had accepted it. He had learned to accept a lot of things. But this wasn't a battlefield. This wasn't chaos. This was quiet. Too quiet. He picked up the torn fabric next. Faded camouflage. Edges burned or ripped, hard to tell which. The kind of damage that didn't come from time. It came from something violent. Something close. Ethan's mind tried to place it. Not a full memory, just fragments. Heat. Pressure. A voice shouting something that never finished. He dropped the fabric back into the box. Not here, he muttered under his breath. Not like this. Ronan stood up. No warning. No hesitation. He walked past Ethan and moved toward the barn again. Ethan watched him. You already got what you wanted? Ronan didn't stop. The barn door resisted when Ethan pushed it open. Wood scraping against wood, a long, dry sound that echoed louder than it should have. Dust shifted in the air as the door gave way, revealing a dim interior broken only by thin lines of sunlight slipping through cracks in the walls. The smell hit immediately. Old hay, dry earth, rust, and something else. Faint. Almost gone. But not gone enough. Ronan stepped inside first. Slow, controlled. Ethan followed, eyes adjusting. The structure leaned slightly, beams warped with age but still holding. Tools lay scattered along one wall, shovels, broken handles, a rusted chain. Nothing that suggested recent use. Nothing that suggested people. And yet, Ronan moved deeper. Not exploring, tracking. He circled once near the far wall, nose low, tail steady, not wagging, not stiff, focused. Ethan crouched beside him. What are you picking up? Ronan paused, then pressed his nose against the ground. Same pattern, same behavior. As before. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. Not again. He brushed dirt aside with his hand, then stopped. Not because he found something, because of what he didn't. The soil here was different, softer, disturbed. Not recently, but not untouched either. Ethan stood slowly, scanning the interior. Whoever had buried the box outside hadn't stopped there. Ronan suddenly froze, not gradually, not shifting. Stopped. Every muscle locked in place. His head lifted, not toward the ground this time, toward the back corner of the barn. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Just shadow. Then, a sound. So faint it barely existed. Not movement, not wind. Something hollow, like a distant echo trapped beneath wood and dirt. Ronan took one step forward, then another. And for the first time since they arrived, he let out a low, controlled growl. Not warning. Recognition. Ethan felt it immediately. That cold, familiar tightening in his chest. The kind that didn't come from fear, but from knowing something had already gone wrong. Ethan moved carefully now. Every step measured. He reached the back corner and crouched, pressing his hand against the ground. Solid, but not natural. He knocked once, a dull, muted response. Not earth, not stone. Something beneath. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. This wasn't just a drop sight, he said quietly. Ronan shifted beside him, staying close now, closer than before. Protective, not guiding. Ethan brushed away more dirt. The outline began to take shape. A seam, faint, hidden beneath layers of soil and time. A panel, smaller than the one outside, but deliberate. Ethan's pulse picked up. Not fast, just enough to remind him this was no accident. Whoever buried Noah's tag had buried more. He sat back on his heels for a moment, thinking, not rushing. That was the difference between survival and mistake. "Okay," he muttered. "Think." Noah Vance. Buried gear, multiple sites, hidden compartments, not battlefield conditions, controlled environment. That meant someone had time, someone had reason, someone had access. Ethan exhaled slowly. "This wasn't loss," he said. Ronan's ears twitched. Ethan looked down at him. "This was placement." The dog didn't respond, but he didn't need to. Ethan stood and stepped back. "Not opening it yet." He wasn't afraid of what was inside. He was cautious of what it meant. Because once he opened it, there was no going back to just a job. Ronan remained where he was, watching the ground. Then, slowly, he turned his head. Not toward Ethan, toward the cabin, as if reminding him there was still something there, something unfinished. Ethan followed. Inside the cabin, the air felt different. Not warmer, just aware. Ethan moved to his pack and pulled out a small notebook. He didn't write often. Didn't need to. But this needed structure. He wrote one line. "Noah Vance, found on site." Then paused, pen hovering. What came next? Missing soldier, buried evidence, or something worse? Ronan lay near the door now, finally lowering his body, but not resting. His head stayed up, eyes fixed on the outside. Watching, always watching. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring at the page. "You ever get the feeling," he said quietly, "that you weren't supposed to find something?" Ronan didn't move. Ethan's gaze shifted toward the barn. "But someone wanted you to anyway?" Silence answered. The forest remained still. The light outside had grown brighter, stronger now, cutting through the trees with clean clarity. Nothing about it looked dangerous. Nothing about it looked wrong. And yet, Ethan closed the notebook slowly. He understood something now, not fully, not clearly, but enough. This place wasn't empty. It wasn't forgotten. It was arranged. And whatever had been arranged here had started long before he arrived. He looked down at Ronan. The dog met his gaze, steady, unwavering. Ethan gave a faint nod. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we just stepped into it." The ground gave way slower than Ethan expected. Not because it was hard, but because whoever sealed it had taken their time. Every layer felt deliberate. Every inch of dirt packed with intention. Ethan worked in silence, using the edge of his knife and his hands when the soil softened. The morning light filtered through the broken slats of the barn, casting thin, pale lines across his back. Dust moved in the air with each motion, catching the light like something trying to exist again. Ronan didn't help this time. He stood just behind Ethan's right shoulder, body still, eyes fixed on the exposed steel panel. No digging, no pacing, watching, waiting. The kind of patience that came from knowing something would not run. It would only be uncovered. Ethan finally cleared enough to get a grip on the edge. The metal was colder than the air around it. Not just temperature, a different kind of cold. He paused. One breath in, one breath out. Then he pulled. The panel shifted with a low, grinding sound. Dirt crumbled off the edges as it lifted, revealing a narrow opening beneath. Dark. Not empty dark, held dark. Ethan leaned slightly forward, letting his eyes adjust. "Stay," he said quietly. Ronan didn't move. He never moved unless Ethan did first. Ethan reached into his pack, pulled out a small flashlight, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness. What it revealed wasn't what he expected. Not a bunker, not a shelter, something smaller, contained. A room. The steps down were shallow, built from old wood reinforced with metal brackets. Not recent, but not collapsed either. Someone had built this to last. Ethan descended slowly. Each step creaked under his weight, but held firm. Ronan followed immediately, brushing lightly against Ethan's leg as they moved. Not out of fear, out of alignment. By the time they reached the bottom, the air had changed. Colder, still, and carrying a scent that didn't belong to earth or wood. Ethan swept the light across the room. Shelves lined the walls, simple, functional, and filled. Not with supplies, not with food, with records, boxes, folders, stacked carefully, organized, preserved. Ethan stepped forward, boots pressing against a floor that felt solid, poured concrete, not natural ground. This wasn't hidden to be forgotten, he murmured. Ronan moved ahead of him, nose low, scanning. The dog paused at one shelf, then another, then settled near a narrow wooden desk pushed against the far wall. Ethan followed. The desk was small, worn, but intact. On top of it sat a single object. A recorder, old, portable, military issued from years back. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then picked it up. The weight in his hand was familiar. Too familiar. He turned it over. There was a marking scratched into the back. Initials. N.V. Ethan's throat tightened. Noah. His thumb hovered over the play button, then pressed. The sound crackled at first. Static. Then a voice. Low. Tired. Controlled. If anyone finds this, don't trust the reports. Ethan froze. Ronan lifted his head slightly. The voice continued. They told us it was a temporary hold. Medical evaluation. Off-grid. Said it was standard after certain missions. A pause. Breathing. Then, it's not. Ethan's grip tightened around the recorder. They're not sending us back. The recording cut abruptly. Silence rushed in to fill the space it left behind. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. The forest above them felt far away now. He set the recorder down carefully, like it might break if he didn't, or worse, like it might speak again if he did. Ronan stepped closer, pressing lightly against Ethan's leg. Grounding, always grounding. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his thoughts to organize. Medical hold, he muttered. Off-grid. His eyes moved across the shelves. This wasn't random. He reached for one of the boxes, opened it. Inside, files. Each labeled, each precise, each with a name. He flipped through them, fast at first, then slower. Because the names, they weren't strangers. They weren't just data. They were men, soldiers, operators, people he had heard of. Some he had worked alongside. Some he had only known by reputation. All of them. Marked the same way. Missing. Ethan closed the box slowly. They didn't go missing, he said. Ronan's ears twitched. Ethan looked down at him. They were taken off the board. Ronan suddenly turned, not toward the shelves, not toward the stairs, toward the far wall. A blank section, no shelves, no desk, nothing. He stepped forward, stopped inches from the wall, then sat, not alert, not tense. Still, calm. Ethan frowned. That's not a search posture, he said quietly. He stepped closer, ran his hand along the wall. Concrete, cold, smooth. Then, a faint indentation, almost invisible, a seam, different from the others. Ethan pressed lightly. Nothing. Pressed harder. Still nothing. Ronan didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, as if waiting. Not for Ethan to find something, but for him to understand something. Ethan's chest tightened, not fear, recognition. The kind that came when something inside you shifted before your mind could explain it. He stepped back slightly, and for the first time since entering the room, he hesitated. He turned away. Not ready. Not yet. Because whatever was behind that wall, it wasn't just information. It was consequence. Instead, Ethan moved back to the desk. He opened a drawer. Inside, photographs. Dozens, black and white. Color, different times, different locations. But all the same kind of image. Men, standing, sitting, sometimes restrained, sometimes not. Faces tired, eyes aware, not confused, not unaware. They knew where they were, and they knew. Something was wrong. Ethan flipped through them, then stopped. One photo, familiar. Too familiar. Noah Vance, standing against a wall that looked exactly like the one behind Ethan now. Alive, not injured, not lost. Looking directly at the camera, and in his eyes, no panic, no fear, just understanding. Ethan swallowed slowly. "You knew," he said under his breath. Ronan shifted slightly beside him. Ethan looked back at the wall, the seam, the hidden space. Whatever was behind it. Noah had seen it. Maybe used it. Maybe tried to stop it. Ethan ran a hand across his face, the stubble scratching against his palm. "This wasn't a holding site," he said. His voice steadier now, colder. It was a filter. Ronan stood, moved back toward the stairs, not retreating, positioning. Ethan understood immediately. They had been down here too long. He took one last look around. Shelves, files, recorder, photos, names. Too many names. Then he turned and started up the steps. Ronan followed close. By the time they stepped back into the barn, the air felt different. Not warmer, just louder. The forest had sound again. Wind through trees, branches shifting, life. But it didn't feel the same. Ethan brushed dirt from his hands, looked back toward the spot beneath the barn, then toward the cabin, then out into the trees. "They buried the story," he said quietly. Ronan stood beside him, steady, unmoving. Ethan exhaled. "But they kept the records." He glanced down at the dog. "And you knew." Ronan didn't respond. Didn't need to. Ethan gave a faint nod. Not agreement. Acceptance. "Yeah," he said. "I'm in it now." The forest didn't change. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. The light still filtered through the tall northern pines, the same way it had the day before. Soft, clean, almost forgiving. The wind moved gently through the branches, carrying that same quiet rhythm that made everything feel untouched. But Ethan knew better now. Places didn't stay untouched. They were kept that way. He stood just outside the cabin, eyes scanning the ground. The tracks were still there. Boot prints. Not his, not old enough to ignore. The pattern was wrong. Too clean, too deliberate. Whoever had walked here hadn't wandered. They had come with purpose, and they hadn't tried to hide it. Ethan crouched slightly, studying the depth of the impression. Heavy enough to carry weight, light enough to move fast. recent. Ronan stood beside him, posture low, ears forward. Not curious, alert. "Yeah," Ethan muttered. "You saw them first, didn't you?" The dog didn't respond. His attention had shifted again, this time toward the edge of the clearing, where the trees grew thicker, darker, less willing to let light through. Ethan straightened slowly. The door behind him creaked. He turned instinctively. It was open, just slightly. He had closed it. He always closed it. Ethan stared at the gap. Not wide enough to suggest force, not narrow enough to be accidental. Someone had been inside. Ronan moved immediately, stepping between Ethan and the cabin entrance, body angled, weight forward. Not aggressive. Protective. Ethan stepped past him anyway, slowly, deliberately. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. Table, chair, pack, everything where it had been. But the air felt different. Not warmer, not colder. Occupied. Ethan walked to the center of the room, eyes scanning without hurry. No panic. Panic wasted time. He checked the corners, the windows, the floor. Nothing obvious. Then he stopped. His notebook. It wasn't where he left it. It sat on the table, closed, but turned. Just slightly. Enough. Ethan picked it up, opened it. The page he had written before. Noah Vance, found on site, still there. But below it, one more line, written in a different hand. You should have left it buried. Ethan didn't react. Not outwardly. But something inside him tightened. Not fear. Recognition. The kind that came when the unknown stopped being distant and started looking back. He stepped outside again. Slower this time, more aware. The clearing felt smaller now, not physically, but in the way it held sound, like it was listening. Ronan moved ahead slightly, then stopped. His body shifted, not into attack, into warning. Ethan followed his gaze and saw him. Victor Hale stood at the edge of the trees, not hidden, not advancing, just there, tall, still, composed. He wore a charcoal-colored coat that fell clean along his frame, untouched by dirt or wear, as if the forest had decided not to mark him. Beneath it, a dark high-collar layer, tailored, precise. His posture was straight, not rigid, but controlled. His face was angular, clean-shaven, with sharp features that didn't soften when he looked at you. Dark hair, neatly kept, no strand out of place. But it was his eyes. Calm, measured, and already knowing. Ethan didn't move, neither did Ronan. Victor stepped forward just enough to leave the shadows, boots quiet against the ground. No rush, no hesitation. "You're Ethan Calder," he said. Not a question. A statement. His voice was low, even, carrying no threat, and yet no warmth either. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Depends who's asking." Victor's mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. I was wondering how long it would take. Ethan's jaw tightened just enough to be noticed. "You've been here before," he said. Victor tilted his head slightly. "Not in the way you're thinking." That answer told Ethan enough. Ronan stepped forward, one step, then stopped, standing between them, his body lowered slightly, muscles tightening beneath his coat. His eyes locked onto Victor, unblinking. Victor glanced at the dog, and for the first time, something changed. Not fear, not concern, recognition. "Military K9, he said quietly. "Disciplined." Ethan didn't respond. Victor looked back at him. "You should listen to him," he added. A pause, then, There are places where instinct understands more than memory. Ronan growled. Not loud, not sudden, but deep, controlled. The kind of sound that came from something older than training, something closer to truth. Ethan had heard that sound before, not often, only when the danger wasn't approaching, but already present. Victor didn't step back, didn't react. He simply watched the dog, then looked at Ethan again. "Interesting," he said softly. Ethan's voice dropped slightly. "What is?" Victor's eyes held his. "He remembers faster than you do." The words landed heavier than they should have. Ethan felt it, not as understanding, but as pressure, like something inside him had just been touched, without permission. Ronan's growl deepened. Just slightly. Victor raised one hand, not to threaten, not to calm, just enough to show he didn't need to do either. "You've been digging," Victor continued. Ethan didn't answer. Victor didn't need him to. His gaze shifted briefly toward the barn, then back. "You always were persistent," he said. That stopped Ethan. Not physically, internally, because that sentence, it didn't belong to a stranger. "You don't know me," Ethan said. Victor held his gaze. "I know enough." A long pause settled between them. The forest didn't move, didn't breathe. Even the wind seemed to step back. Ethan's voice came quieter now. "You said always." Victor didn't blink. "I said many things." Ethan took one step forward. "Try again." For a moment, just a moment, Victor's expression shifted. Not emotion, calculation. Then it was gone. "You served," Victor said. "Special operations, multiple deployments, classified rotations." Ethan didn't react. "You worked alongside Noah Vance." That one landed, harder. Ronan shifted slightly, pressing closer. Victor watched that too. "You lost him," he said. Ethan's voice dropped. "He was declared missing." Victor tilted his head. "Yes." The word lingered, like it wasn't finished. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You knew him." Victor didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked past Ethan, toward the cabin, then back again. "You found something you weren't meant to understand," he said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then explain it." Victor's gaze sharpened. Explanation implies permission. Silence. Heavy. Ethan took another step forward. "Then start giving it." Victor studied him, longer this time. Then, he shook his head once, slow. No, not refusal, finality. He reached into his coat. Ethan's body shifted slightly, not visibly, but ready. Victor noticed. Of course he did. He didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a small card, held it between two fingers, then stepped forward. Ronan's growl sharpened. Victor stopped. Just outside the dog's range, held the card out. Ethan didn't take it. "Things don't stay buried because they're forgotten," Victor said quietly. "They stay buried because they're protected." Ethan's eyes didn't leave his. "By who?" Victor's expression didn't change. "That's the part you don't survive asking." Another pause. Then Victor lowered his hand slightly. Not offended, not impatient, just finished. "You've stepped into something that doesn't end well," he added. Ethan's voice came steady. "Then why are you warning me?" Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then, "Because you're not the first," he said, "and you won't be the last." That was the closest thing to truth he had offered. Victor stepped back, turned, and walked toward the trees. No rush, No need. The forest seemed to open for him, then close again, as if he had never been there. Ethan stood still. Ronan's growl faded slowly, but his posture didn't relax. Not completely. Ethan exhaled, long, controlled. Then looked down at the card still lying in the dirt between them. He picked it up. Blank. No name, no number. Just a symbol, faint, etched. Ethan stared at it, then slipped it into his pocket. He looked toward the barn, then toward the ground beneath it, then out into the trees. "They're watching," he said quietly. Ronan stood beside him, steady, present. Ethan nodded once, not to the dog, to himself. "Good." His voice didn't rise, didn't harden, but something inside it had changed. They just made it real. The road out of the forest felt longer than the way in. Not because of distance, because of weight. Ethan Calder drove in silence, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near his thigh where the small metal dog tag sat in his pocket. He could feel it there, like it had its own gravity, pulling at something deeper than muscle or bone. Ronan sat beside him, still, alert, not watching the road, watching Ethan. The German shepherd's ears shifted subtly with every change in the engine's rhythm, every shift in Ethan's breathing. He wasn't tracking scent now. He was tracking something else, something internal. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You don't like this," he muttered. Ronan didn't respond, but his posture didn't change either. That was answer enough. The town wasn't much. A handful of buildings stretched along a single road, weathered wood, faded paint, signs that had stopped trying to be read. It sat between forest and emptiness, the kind of place people passed through without remembering. Ethan parked in front of a small records office. The building looked older than the road it faced. Narrow windows, a wooden door that had been repaired more times than replaced. A metal sign hung slightly crooked above it. County Archive. He stepped out. The air here felt different. Heavier. Not with danger. With history. Ronan followed, moving close, closer than usual. Not pulling ahead, not scanning outward. Staying with Ethan. That told him something. This wasn't a place the dog trusted. Ethan pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust. Not unpleasant, just still. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes and files stacked in careful order. A desk sat near the center, cluttered but organized in its own way. Behind it stood a woman. She looked up as Ethan entered. Lila Mercer. She was younger than Ethan expected, early 30s, maybe mid-30s at most. Her frame was slim, almost fragile at first glance, but there was a steadiness in the way she stood that suggested otherwise. She wore a long gray coat, simple, functional, the kind of thing someone wore when they didn't care about being noticed. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled loosely back, strands falling around her face like she hadn't taken the time to fix them. Her skin was pale, not from lack of sun, but from long hours spent indoors. Her eyes, they were the kind of eyes that didn't move quickly. They studied. They waited. And they carried something heavier than grief, expectation. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was calm, not guarded, just careful. Ethan stepped forward slowly. Ronan stayed just behind him, watching, always watching. "I'm looking for records," Ethan said. Lila nodded slightly. "What kind?" Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out the dog tag, set it gently on the desk. The metal made a soft sound as it touched wood. Lila's eyes dropped to it, and for a moment, nothing happened. No reaction, No shift. Then, her fingers moved, slowly, carefully. She picked it up, turned it, read the name, Noah Vance. Her breath didn't catch, her hands didn't shake. She didn't cry, she just stood there, holding it, like she had been waiting to. "He didn't die out there," she said quietly. Not a question, not doubt, a statement. Ethan studied her. "You already knew that." Lila looked up at him, and in her eyes, there it was. Not hope, not fear, certainty. "They said missing," she said. "But they never showed me anything. No recovery, no location, no explanation that held together long enough to believe." She set the tag back down. "But I kept looking." Ethan leaned slightly against the desk. "For 8 years?" Lila nodded once. "People stop asking questions when they're given something to bury," she said. "A report, a date, a story." Her gaze hardened slightly. "I didn't get one." Ethan pulled the recorder from his pack, set it beside the tag. Lila's eyes shifted to it. "What is that?" Ethan didn't answer. He pressed play. The static filled the room again. Then Noah's voice, low, controlled, unfinished. Lila didn't move, didn't interrupt, didn't breathe. When it ended, she closed her eyes, not in pain, in recognition. "I knew it," she whispered. Ronan stepped forward, closer than before, not to Ethan, to Lila. The dog stopped just in front of her, lowered his head slightly, not submissive, not cautious. Something else. He inhaled once, then again, slow, measured. Lila didn't move. Her eyes remained closed. Then, she opened them and looked directly at Ronan. For a brief second, everything in the room stilled. No movement, no sound. Just connection. Ronan's tail moved. Once. Small, certain. Ethan felt it. That shift. That quiet confirmation. Not logic, not evidence. Something deeper. Lila exhaled slowly. "He would have trusted you," she said softly. Not to Ethan, to the dog. Ethan watched them both. Something in his chest tightened. Not discomfort, not confusion. Recognition. He had seen soldiers trust less. Lila stepped back slightly, collecting herself. "What did you find?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate this time. "Records," he said. "Names, files, a storage site, hidden." Lila's expression didn't change, but her posture did. Straighter, sharper. "Not just him," she said. Ethan shook his head. "No." A pause. Then, "They weren't lost," he added. "They were moved." Lila absorbed that. Not slowly, not emotionally, directly. "Then we need to prove it," she said. No hesitation, no fear, just direction. Ethan studied her. "You've been doing this a long time." Lila nodded. "I stopped waiting for answers," she said. "I started looking for patterns." She turned slightly, walking to one of the shelves, pulled a file, opened it. Inside were clippings, reports, names, dates, all connected, not randomly, systematically. "These aren't disappearances," she said. "They're removals." Ethan stepped closer. "How many?" Lila flipped through the pages. "Enough that no one wants to count them." Ethan leaned back slightly, mind moving, pieces aligning. Victor, the site, the files, the warning. "They know we're looking," he said. Lila didn't look surprised. "They've always known I was looking," she replied. Ethan met her gaze. "But now they know I found something." Lila nodded once. "Yes." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just real. Ethan picked up the dog tag again, turned it in his fingers. "You want the truth?" he asked. Lila didn't hesitate. "I want what actually happened," she said. Ethan studied her. "You understand that might not give you peace?" Lila's expression didn't change. "I didn't come this far for peace." Ronan shifted slightly, moved back to Ethan's side. But his attention stayed on Lila, watching, assessing, then accepting. Ethan slipped the tag back into his pocket. "Then we go back," he said. Lila closed the file, picked up her coat. No hesitation, no second thought. "I've been ready," she replied. Ethan gave a faint nod. Not approval, acknowledgement. He turned toward the door. Ronan moved ahead this time, leading. For the first time since they arrived. He didn't hesitate. Outside, the light had shifted. Brighter, clearer. The kind of daylight that made everything visible. And yet, Ethan knew. Visibility didn't mean safety. It meant exposure. He opened the truck door. Lila paused beside him. "You said you found something buried," she said. Ethan looked at her. "I found what they left behind." Lila's eyes held his. "And what they didn't?" Ethan's voice stayed steady. "I think we're about to." The forest did not warn them. That was the first mistake. Ethan had expected movement, a sound, a shift in the air. Something to signal that the balance had changed again. But the night came the same way it always did. Slow, quiet, patient. By the time he realized something was wrong, it already was. The truck rolled back into the clearing just after dusk. The sky above the northern forest still held a faint trace of blue, but the trees had already swallowed most of the light. Shadows stretched longer here, thicker, clinging to the ground like they belonged to something deeper than absence. Ethan killed the engine. Lila stepped out beside him. She moved differently out here, more cautious than before, but not hesitant. Her eyes scanned the surroundings with a quiet awareness, like she had trained herself to expect disappointment, not danger. Ronan jumped down last. The moment his paws hit the ground, he stopped. Not gradually, instant. Every muscle locked. Ethan saw it immediately. "What is it?" Ronan didn't answer. He didn't move. His head tilted slightly, not toward the barn, not toward the cabin, toward the space between them, the empty space. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Just air. Just stillness. But Ronan's posture tightened further. Then, he stepped forward, slow, measured, and let out a low sound. Not a growl. Not yet. A warning. Ethan's chest tightened. "They've been here," he said quietly. Lila turned to him. "You're sure?" Ethan didn't look at her. "I don't guess." They moved quickly, not rushed, controlled. Ethan approached the cabin first. The door hung open, wider than before. The wood frame had been splintered near the latch. Clean break, not weather damage. Forced. Ethan stepped inside, stopped. The air hit differently, not stale, disturbed. His pack had been opened, contents shifted, not scattered, searched. Lila stepped in behind him, her breath catching slightly. Not in fear, but in recognition. "They knew what to look for," she said. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." Ronan moved past them, straight through the room, no hesitation, toward the barn. The barn door was already open, not creaked, not forced, opened clean. Ethan didn't slow down. He stepped inside and stopped. The ground, the panel, everything. Gone. Not removed. Destroyed. The section where the hidden structure had been caved in. Concrete shattered inward. Wood splintered. Dirt collapsed over itself like something had punched through from above and below at the same time. Ethan stared at it. For a long moment. Nothing moved. Nothing made sense. Then, they collapsed it, Lila said quietly behind him. Her voice was steady, too steady. Ethan didn't turn. They didn't want it found again. No, Ethan said. His voice dropped slightly. They didn't want it used. That was the difference, and it mattered. A sound cut through the silence, sharp, close. Not from the barn, from outside. Ronan reacted first. He spun, body low. And this time, he didn't hesitate. He charged. Ethan moved instantly. No thought. Just action. He cleared the doorway in 2 steps and saw the movement. A figure, dark, fast, cutting between the trees. Not running blindly. Retreating with direction. Ethan followed. Ronan was already ahead. The distance closed fast. Too fast. Then, a second shadow shifted. Not fleeing. Waiting. Ethan's instincts hit before his mind did. Ronan! Too late. The sound cracked through the forest. Not loud, but enough. Ronan's body jerked mid-stride. Not a fall. Not collapse. A hit. Controlled. Measured. He landed hard, rolled, then pushed himself back up. Ethan reached him in seconds. Dropped to one knee. Hands already moving. Easy. Easy. Ronan didn't whine. Didn't pull away. He stood, breathing steady, but his front leg, blood, dark against his fur. Not deep, but real. Ethan's jaw tightened. Damn it! The forest went still again. The figures were gone. No sound. No movement. Just gone. Ethan's hands worked fast. Pressure, wrap, stabilize. His movements were precise, automatic. The kind built from years of treating wounds that didn't have time to wait. Lila knelt beside him. Her hands hovered for a moment, unsure where to help, then steadied. What do you need? Ethan didn't look up. Cloth? Tight. She pulled a strip from her coat lining without hesitation, handed it to him. Ethan wrapped it carefully. Firm, but not cutting circulation. Ronan stood the entire time. No resistance, no fear, just watching Ethan, trusting, always trusting. Ethan exhaled slowly. It's not deep, he said. They weren't trying to kill him. Lila looked toward the trees. Then what? Ethan's eyes darkened slightly. They were sending a message. Silence settled again. Heavier now, different, not empty, occupied. Lila sat back slightly, her gaze moving between Ethan and Ronan. They knew you'd follow, she said. Ethan nodded. They wanted me to. Ronan shifted his weight, testing the leg. It held. Not perfect, but enough. Ethan watched him. Something in his chest tightened. Not fear, not anger. Something worse. Understanding. You keep going, Lila said quietly. Ethan didn't respond. You keep pushing this, she continued, and next time it won't be a warning. Ethan looked at her. Finally. And if I stop? Lila held his gaze. They win. A pause, then. They already took him, she added softly. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not the same thing. No, Lila said. It's not. Her voice didn't break, didn't rise, but it carried something heavier than emotion. Truth. Ethan looked down at Ronan. The dog met his eyes. Steady, unshaken, even now, even wounded. Ethan exhaled slowly. You should stay, he said quietly. Not to Lila, to the dog. Ronan didn't move, didn't step back, didn't hesitate. Instead, he shifted his weight forward, took a step toward the barn, toward the collapsed ground, toward the place that no longer existed the way it had before. Ethan watched him. Ronan. The dog didn't stop. Another step. Unsteady, but certain. Then another. And then he paused, turned his head slightly. Not away, not retreating, just enough to look back at Ethan, waiting, not for command, for choice. Ethan felt it then, clearer than anything since this began. The line, the one that separates leaving from staying, from surviving, from standing. He closed his eyes for a second, just one, then opened them. Something inside him had shifted, not hardened, settled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." He stood, slow, deliberate, looked once at the trees, then back at the ground, then at Ronan. The dog held his gaze, no doubt, no hesitation. Ethan nodded, once. All right. Ethan didn't leave. Not that night, not the next morning, and not after the blood dried on Ronan's leg. The forest looked the same. That was the strange part. Sunlight still slipped through the trees in quiet, patient lines. The wind still moved like it had somewhere to be, brushing through branches and grass without asking permission. The cabin still stood, worn, imperfect, but upright. Nothing in the world had changed, except the meaning of everything inside it. Ethan moved with purpose now, not searching, not reacting, ending. He gathered what remained, the recorder, the files he had taken, the fragments of names burned into his memory. He didn't rush. Rushing was for survival. This wasn't that. This was something else. Ronan followed him through it all. The German shepherd moved carefully, his injured leg slower but steady. The bandage had darkened slightly, but the wound held. His posture hadn't changed. Still alert, still watching, still there. Ethan noticed that more than anything. Not the injury, the decision. "You should be resting," Ethan muttered at one point, kneeling to check the wrap again. Ronan didn't pull away, didn't flinch, just stood, watching him. Ethan exhaled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I figured." Lila sat on the edge of the cabin steps. Her gray coat hung loosely around her, catching the light in soft folds. She looked different out here, less contained. Not fragile, she had never been that, but no longer holding herself together quite as tightly. She held a folder in her hands, not gripping it, not hiding it, just holding it. Ethan stepped outside and leaned against the wooden post near her. "It's enough," he said. Lila didn't look up immediately. Her eyes remained on the pages. "Enough for what?" she asked. Ethan's voice stayed level. "To stop them from pretending it didn't happen." That made her look at him. Her eyes searched his face, not for answers, for certainty. "You think that's how this ends?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "No." A pause. "But it's where it starts." They drove out just before noon. This time, Ethan didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was carrying it forward. The office was different from the archive. Cleaner, brighter, less history, more control. The name on the glass door read, Daniel Brooks, Legal Counsel. Inside, the man looked exactly like his name suggested. Daniel Brooks was in his late 40s, tall, lean, with sharp features that had softened over time rather than hardened. His hair was thinning at the temples, streaked with gray, but his eyes remained sharp, measured, observant, the kind that noticed more than they spoke about. He wore a simple white shirt, with the sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows, no tie, no pretense. He stood when they entered. "You don't look like clients," he said. His voice wasn't dismissive, just honest. Ethan stepped forward. "We're not." Daniel studied him for a moment, then Lila, then Ronan. His gaze lingered on the dog slightly longer than expected. Not fear, assessment. Then back to Ethan. "Then you're here for something else." Ethan placed the recorder on the desk, then the files, then the photographs. Daniel didn't touch them immediately. He looked at Ethan instead. "Tell me what I'm about to see." Ethan's voice didn't change. "The part they buried?" Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, didn't react the way most people would. He just absorbed, carefully, piece by piece. By the time Ethan finished, the room felt smaller. Not physically, but in the way truth reduces space for denial. Daniel leaned back slightly. His hands rested on the desk. "Steady. These are real," he said. Not a question. Ethan nodded once. Daniel exhaled slowly. "They're going to fight this." Ethan didn't blink. "I know." Daniel's eyes moved to Lila. "You understand what this means?" he asked. Lila met his gaze. "It means he didn't disappear," she said. Daniel held her eyes for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right," he said. And for the first time, something shifted. Not doubt. Commitment. Ronan moved. Not toward Ethan, not toward Lila, toward the door. He stopped just before it, body still, head slightly lowered. Listening. Ethan saw it immediately. That change, that focus. He stepped closer. "What is it?" Ronan didn't respond. He never did. But he didn't need to. Ethan opened the door. Outside, a black vehicle sat across the street. Engine off, windows dark, still. Too still. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He didn't step out, didn't approach. He just watched. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the driver's door opened. Victor Hale stepped out. Same coat, same posture, same calm control. He didn't walk toward the office, didn't speak. He just stood there, looking. Not at Ethan, not at Lila, at Ronan. The dog didn't move, didn't growl, didn't react. He just stood and watched back. Victor tilted his head slightly. Not acknowledgement, not approval. Something else. Then he got back into the vehicle and drove away. No threat, no words, just presence. Ethan closed the door slowly. The room felt heavier now. Daniel had seen enough. He didn't need explanation. "I'll file everything," he said. "Public record, press access, legal exposure." Ethan nodded. Lila didn't speak. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the desk, not shaking, not gripping, just there. "Once this moves," Daniel continued, "it doesn't stop." Ethan met his gaze. "Good." It didn't take long. Truth doesn't move fast. But once it moves, it doesn't stop. People started asking questions, quiet at first, then louder. Records resurfaced, names matched, stories aligned, the pattern became visible. And once it was seen, it couldn't be unseen. Victor didn't disappear. But he changed. Less visible, less present, less certain. Because control doesn't survive exposure. Time passed. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough. The forest remained, unchanged. Sunlight, wind, the cabin, still there, still standing. But something had shifted. A small wooden sign stood near the edge of the clearing now. Simple, handmade, names carved into it, carefully, one by one, not rushed, not perfect, but permanent. Lila stood in front of it. Her hand rested lightly against the wood, fingers tracing a single name. Noah Vance. She didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't need to, because this was the answer she had been waiting for. Not closure. Truth. Ethan sat a few feet away, back against the cabin wall, boots stretched out in front of him. The same posture, but not the same man. Ronan lay beside him, closer than usual. His leg had healed. Not perfectly, but enough. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, at peace. Ethan looked at him for a long moment, then spoke. Quiet. You didn't just find them. Ronan's ears shifted slightly. Ethan's gaze moved to the sign, to the names, to the space that no longer felt empty. You brought me back too. Ronan's tail moved. Once, small, certain. The wind moved gently through the trees, not carrying anything away, just passing through. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel like he needed to follow it. There are moments in life when everything feels lost. When the path disappears. When the silence grows too heavy. And when it feels like no one is listening. But sometimes, what we call coincidence is something greater. A dog refusing to give up. A man who almost walked away, but didn't. A truth buried for years, finally brought back into the light. Maybe that's not luck. Maybe that's grace. Because God doesn't always speak in loud voices or clear signs. Sometimes he speaks through loyalty, through instinct, through the quiet pull that tells you to keep going when everything inside you says to stop. And maybe today, this story found you for a reason. If you're going through something right now, something heavy, something you don't fully understand, just remember, you are not forgotten. You are not alone. And your story is not finished yet. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need it too. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Or simply share what this story made you feel. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Dog Stories, because there are more stories like this waiting to find you. Before you go, let me say a quiet prayer for you. May God guide your steps when the road feels uncertain. May he bring light into the places in your life that feel dark. May he give you strength when you feel tired, and peace when your heart is restless. And may you always find your way back, just like he did. We'll be here when you're ready for the next story.